The story that you are about to hear is a compilation of documented true facts, featuring characters, events, or places that has played a role in shaping history. Please sit back and listen as I recite this narrative for you. During the late evening of April 11, 1981, or the following early morning, a quadruple homicide that remains unsolved to this day took place in cabin 28 of the Keddie Resort in Keddie, California. On the morning of April 12, 1981, Sheila Sharp returned to her home at cabin 28 from the next door's neighbor's house and found the bodies of her mother Sue, her brother John, and Dana, John's friend. Sheila was Sue's 14-year-old daughter and had been sleeping at a friend's house. The three had been bound by medical and electrical tape and had either been viciously stabbed, strangled, or bludgeoned. Sue's two younger sons, Rick and Greg, as well as their friend Justin Smart, were also in the house but were unharmed. They had apparently slept through the entire massacre, which had unfolded mere feet from their beds. Her friend's dad retrieved the three unharmed boys through their bedroom window so they would not have to see the scene. Tina, another daughter of Sue, was missing from the scene. She would remain a missing person until April 1984, when her skull and several other bones would be recovered at Camp 18, California, near Feather Falls in Butte County. The Sharp family had just moved into cabin 28 the year before. Sue had just divorced her husband and brought her children from Connecticut to Keddie in Northern California. The six of them were friendly with their nearby neighbors at the Keddie Resort. She decided on California to be closer to her brother. They first settled in Quincy, California, moving into a one-bedroom trailer that her brother and his wife had recently vacated, but the cramped trailer park was not ideal for the large family. Sue had heard that there was a small resort town nearby in Keddie, California, facing financial problems and converted their cabins into low-income housing. April 11, 1981 was like any other day, and it was a typical Saturday. Johnny and his best friend Dana Wingate were in the next town over, Quincy, looking for a party. Sheila and Tina were at a neighboring cabin playing with the Seabolt children. Ricky and Greg were at home with Sue. At 8 a.m. the next morning, Sheila went home to change. However, when she entered the home, she was met with a ghastly sight. She recognized her brother Johnny lying face up, covered in blood. There was another boy face down, and they were both tied at the feet. She saw a yellow blanket covering what she thought looked like another body, but she didn't know who. She ran out of the cabin, screaming back to the Seabolts, who called the police. Sheila and James Seabolt Jr. went back to cabin 28 to find the rest of the family. Looking into the cabin's windows, they see the youngest boys and Justin sleeping in their bedroom. They woke them up by tapping on the window and insisted that they crawl through the window so they weren't traumatized by the horrors in the living room. Sheila sent Justin home to his parents, and the boys waited with Sheila for the police to arrive. James continued to explore the house, looking for any more survivors. Because Sheila hadn't been sure who the person under the blanket was, and because the boys were unharmed, it wasn't clear who may still be in the house. James noted that the back door to the cabin was left open. He walked through the cabin, calling out, but when no one appeared or responded, he left the cabin and rejoined the crowd of people forming outside. Deputy Hank Clement was the first to arrive on the scene, and he reported blood everywhere. On the walls, the bottoms of the victim's shoes, Sue's bare feet, the bedding in Tina's room, the furniture, the ceiling, the doors, and on the back steps. He confirmed all three bodies were deceased. The prevalence of blood suggested to investigators that the victims had been moved and rearranged from the positions in which they were murdered. Sergeant Jerry Shaver was next on the scene and spoke to a group of people outside and took their statements. Sheriff Sylvester Doug Thomas and Assistant Sheriff Ken Shanks came to the scene, and then Don Stoy joined them. The scene now had 5 officers walk through it. 15-year-old John was closest to the front door, face up, his hands blood-covered and bound with medical tape. His throat had been slit. His friend Dana was on the floor beside him on his stomach. His head was badly damaged as though bashed in with a blunt object and lay partially on a pillow. He had been manually strangled. His ankles were tied with electrical tape, which was wound also around John's ankles so that the two were connected. Sheila's mother had been covered partially with a blanket, though that had done little to hide her gruesome injuries. On her side, the mother of 5 was naked from the waist down, tightly gagged with a bandana and her own underwear secured with medical tape. She had injuries consistent with a struggle and had an imprint of the butt of an .880 pellet gun on the side of her head. Like her son, her throat had been cut. All victims had suffered blunt force trauma by hammer or hammers. They also sustained multiple stab wounds. A bent steak knife was on the floor. A butcher knife and claw hammer, both also bloodied, were side by side on a small wooden table near the entry into the kitchen. Officers did a house-by-house welfare checks and interviewed potential witnesses, and it wasn't until several hours that officers noticed Tina was unaccounted for. The FBI was called to investigate her disappearance, but were only involved for 2 weeks, and the case was handed back to the Plumas County Sheriff's Office. There was no apparent motive, which made the murder seem random. Furthermore, the home did not indicate forced entry, though detectives did recover an unidentified fingerprint from a handrail on the back stairs. The cabin's telephone had been left off the hook, and all of the lights had been shut off as well as the drapes closed. The most confusing thing about the homicide was that 3 young boys slept through the whole ordeal. The killers just left them as potential witnesses. Ricky and Greg had no recollection, and the first thing they remembered was Sheila waking them. Justin reported having told his mother that he had dreamt he had heard noises in the living room. When he opened the bedroom door, he saw Sue talking to 2 men. One reportedly had a mustache and long hair, and the other clean-shaven with short hair, but both in glasses. One of the men had a hammer. In the home, investigators found 2 bloody kitchen knives used with such force that one was severely bent, a hammer, and a pellet gun. Each victim had been bound with medical tape and electrical cords taken from various appliances around the home and extension cords. Sheila stated that they had never had the medical tape in the house before, so it was believed at least one of the suspects brought it with them. Evidence collected by investigators were drops of blood on Tina's bed, a bloody footprint in the yard, knife marks on various walls in the home, and a bloody fingerprint on the inside of a door frame and a railing. Justin stated that John and Dana entered the home and argued with the man, which resulted in a violent fight. Tina was then allegedly taken out the cabin's back door by one of the men. Immediately, the 2 lead suspects were Justin Smart's father and the Sharps' neighbors, Martin Smart and his house guest, ex-convict John Bo DeBee, who was known to have connections to organized crime in the area. Both men had been seen in suits and ties behaving oddly in the bar the night before. Martin Smart later told the police that he had a hammer which matched the one discovered, and also that his hammer had gone missing shortly before the murders. Later that year, a knife was recovered in a trash can outside the Keddie General Store. Authorities also believed this item to be linked to the crimes. It would be another 3 years after the Keddie murders that Tina was found. Along with the remains, they found a child's blanket, a blue nylon jacket, a pair of Levi's jeans with a missing back pocket, and an empty surgical tape dispenser. Police pursued many theories, putting 4,000 working hours into the case. Detectives ruled out the serial killers Henry Lee Lucas and Otis Toole, who were active in the area of the killings. There were strong beliefs in the community that the Plumas County Sheriff's Office had quietly tucked the case away. Many believed that some leads weren't followed, evidence wasn't checked, some evidence was ignored completely. The Plumas County Sheriff's Department interviewed everyone in the Keddie cabins and anyone else who knew the victims. Among those interviewed was Justin Eason's stepfather, Martin Smart. The most widely accepted theory involves a love triangle between Martin, Marilyn, and Sue. It was believed that Martin and Sue were having an affair and that Sue was supposedly counseling Marilyn to leave her husband, who she had said was abusive to her. When Martin discovered this, he enlisted Bo, his friend and known mob enforcer who had lived with the Smarts a mere 10 days before the Keddie murders, to take Sue out of the picture. This would account for Marilyn leaving her husband the day of the murder discovery. It would also explain why the Smart boy and the other sharp boys in the adjoining room were spared. Additionally, it gives context to Martin's handwritten note that Marilyn gave to the Plumas Sheriff's Department. It read, "I've paid the price of your love, and now that I've bought it with 4 people's lives, you tell me we are through? Great. What else do you want?" This letter was not treated as a confession, nor was it followed up on at that time. Someone in the Sheriff's Department allegedly tipped off Martin and Baudabi that they were suspects, and both men quickly found work outside of California. In 2016, an anonymous counselor from the Reno Veterans Administration stated that he met with Martin Smart in May of 1981, and he confessed to killing Sue and Tina Sharp but had nothing to do with the killing of John and Dana. When the DOJ was alerted to this confession in 1981, they dismissed it as hearsay. Some investigators who picked up the case when it reopened in 2013 tied the slayings into an even larger plot. It was alleged that Bo and Martin fit into a larger drug smuggling scheme which involved the federal government, which is why the homicide was covered up. Martin was a known drug dealer and Bo was connected to Chicago crime syndicates with financial interests in drug distribution. Although both Martin Smart and Bo Baudabi are now deceased, the new DNA evidence has pointed investigators to other suspects who may have had a hand in these murders and who are still alive. The lead investigators currently working on the case are confident that they will have this solved very soon. Sheila Sharp continues to work with law enforcement and media to keep her family's cold case alive. Hey everyone! I just wanted to express how grateful I am that you took the time to listen to my narration. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I am Twysted Mind and please enjoy the rest of your day. Salamat!